So now we're going to do a French seam. So a French seam, I know we've marked one, like the pattern pieces, this rectangles all had 1 centimeter seam allowance, but for this one we're going to use a slightly different amount. So it is often in industry, it depends a bit, you use 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, but I found here in Dubai, for example, they actually do use 1 centimeter, but that would mean you need to pre-trim everything by hand as well. So the first stitching, I want you to do around 5 millimeters from the edge. So again, you can use your tape measure. You see where your needle would come down, and then you see where that would be in comparison to the edge of the fabric. So 4 to 5 millimeters would be great. And then you start sewing over the back stitch. Always making sure that the two pieces are aligned. Yeah, you can see they're on top of each other. I had a pin on each end. If you need more pins, you can add more pins to make sure the fabric doesn't move. Okay, now we go to the iron. Okay, so now for the French seam, we kind of proceed the same way as we do for the closed seam. I will press all my seam allowance in one direction. So you just see the main difference so far is that the seam allowance is a lot smaller. It's only 5 millimeters instead of 1 centimeter. So now from this side, I want to make sure that again, I don't have any pleat or fabric kind of being folded over. So make sure it's good as well. Okay, so now that we have this, we fold it on the edge of the seam. So exactly where the seam is. That's what you want to have on the folded edge this time. And then you press it again. So first time we pressed it like a closed seam in one direction, press from both sides, and then second time pressing, we folded the fabric so that the seam is directly on the edge, on the folded edge. Now we go back to the sewing machine and add one more row of stitching. Now the French seam, basically, we will have another stitch here, and then there's no raw edges to be seen. So on the other pieces so far, we would have to put overlocking for it to be secured, right? Because see what happens to the fabric, depends on the fabric, this can fray a lot. So this is where we want to always overlock our edges, or in the case of a French seam, we don't have to. So now because we are going to fold this over and we're going to stitch, our first one was at 5 millimeters, so this one should be at least 7 millimeters. And then if I open it, I should not see anything. Okay, so see this? This is the fraying edges of the fabric. You don't want this to happen. Okay, so this fabric that I have here frays a lot, so I would have to trim it. Yeah, I would want to trim it first before I start sewing. And if your seam allowance on the inside is very uneven, or maybe you took too much in an area, then you also want to trim it. Okay, I leave some here on the bottom on purpose, just so I can show you something. Okay, but here at the top I trimmed everything nice and neat. And this fabric continues to fray, so it's a bit difficult. And then I'm going back to my machine. And like I said, I want to stitch at around 7 millimeters because I want to catch all that seam allowance. Should not be visible anymore. Normal stitching with back stitch. Again, I'm finding myself a reference point which is 7 millimeters. In general, you should never hold onto the fabric, neither push it. Yeah, the machine here has got some teeth that transport the fabric for you, and as much as the setting is adjusted to. So don't hold the fabric. Just guide it so it stays straight. Okay, so here's my French seam. So on this side, I have a very clean seam. This is the outside of my garment. Okay, and on the inside of the garment, I also have no raw edges. Yeah, it's a beautiful finish. Definitely often used for sheer fabric, because in sheer fabrics you don't want to see any overlooking. And let's just see here is where I didn't trim my threads. See that? So this is obviously really annoying, and maybe here I can pull them out. But if you have a lot of that and you need to trim it all, then you risk that you cut into your fabric. You risk that little pieces of thread stand still there. So that's why you want to trim beforehand, not afterwards. Okay, and that's your French seam done.